They say love is blind, but sometimes it's just looking the other way. Julian Thorne thought he was discarding a burden, a plain, quiet wife who didn't fit his shiny billion-dollar life. He handed her divorce papers on the same day she was going to tell him about the baby. He left her for the flashing cameras and the supermodel on his arm, convinced he had upgraded. He didn't know that the woman he called boring was actually Ryder Vance, the sole heiress to the largest tech empire in the Western Hemisphere. By the time he realized he had divorced the woman who could buy and sell him 10 times over, it wasn't just his marriage that was over. It was his entire world. This is the story of how a king threw away his queen, only to realize he was just a pawn. The rain didn't just fall on New York City that night. It battered the glass walls of the penthouse on 432 Park Avenue like it was trying to break in. Inside, the air was colder than the storm. Julian Thorne stood by the window, staring out at the grey abyss of Manhattan. He adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Tom Ford suit, the fabric costing more than most people's cars. He didn't turn around when he heard the soft footsteps behind him. He knew the gate. It was hesitant, soft, boring. "Julian?" The voice belonged to Ryder. She was standing near the kitchen island, her hands wrapped protectively around a mug of herbal tea. She looked pale, her oversized beige cardigan swallowing her petite frame. She looked nothing like the wives of his business rivals. She didn't wear diamonds to breakfast. She didn't gossip about the Hamptons. She was just Ryder. A librarian he had met 3 years ago in a coffee shop in Brooklyn when he was still climbing the ladder, before Thorne Enterprises had gone global. Back then, her quiet support was what he needed. Now? She was an anchor, slowing down a speedboat. Julian turned, his face a mask of practiced indifference. He walked to the marble dining table and slid a thick manila envelope across the surface. It stopped inches from her hand. "We need to talk, Ryder." Ryder looked at the envelope, then up at him. Her hazel eyes, usually warm, flickered with confusion. "I have something to tell you too, Julian. I went to the doctor today and—" "Save it," Julian interrupted, his voice sharp. "This can't wait." He tapped the envelope. "I'm filing for divorce." The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the rain lashing against the glass. Ryder set her mug down. Her hand trembled slightly, but she didn't cry. That was the thing about Ryder. She never made a scene. It was another thing that annoyed him lately. No fire. No passion. "Divorce?" she whispered. "Why? Is it because of the late nights? The business trips? Julian, I know you're stressed about the merger with Helios Systems, but it's not the merger," Julian snapped, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "It's us, Ryder. Look at you. Look at me. We don't make sense anymore. I'm the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. I need a partner who understands that world, who can walk a red carpet without looking like she's afraid of her own shadow. Someone who brings value to the Thorne name." "Value," Ryder repeated, the word tasting like ash. She instinctively moved her hand to her stomach, her fingers splaying over the flat fabric of her sweater. "I thought love was the value." Julian scoffed, a cruel, dismissive sound. "Love doesn't impress shareholders, Ryder. Image does. Power does. And Sasha Cross does." The name hung in the air like toxic smoke. Julian stiffened. "How do you know about Sasha?" Ryder finally looked up, her eyes locking onto his. "You're not as careful as you think, Julian. The receipts from Le Bernardin, the late-night texts you didn't delete, the paparazzi photos of you two discussing business in Milan." "Since you know, it makes this easier," Julian said, dropping the pretense. "Sasha she's everything I need right now. She's the face of Vogue. She has connections in media, in fashion, in high society. Being with her raises the stock price. Being with you, it keeps me stagnant." "I see," Ryder said softly. She picked up the envelope. "So I'm a bad investment." "It's just business, Ryder. I'm being generous. You get the apartment in Queens, the Honda, and a monthly stipend for 2 years. It's more than you deserve, considering you brought nothing into this marriage but debt and a cat." Ryder stared at him. For a second, Julian thought he saw a flash of something dangerous in her eyes, a cold, hard steel that he had never seen before. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a profound sadness. "I have something to tell you, Julian," she said again, her voice steadying. "I'm pregnant." Julian froze. His eyes dropped to her stomach, then back to her face. For a moment, shock registered. Then his jaw tightened. He looked at his watch, a Patek Philippe he'd bought to celebrate his first $1,000,000. "You're lying," he said coldly. "You're saying this to trap me, to stall the proceedings." "I'm 10 weeks along," Ryder said. "I have the ultrasound in my bag." Julian took a step toward her, his face darkening. "If you are, get rid of it, or raise it alone. I am not derailing my life for a mistake. Sasha and I are going public next week at the Met Gala. I won't have a weeping ex-wife and a brat dragging me down in the tabloids." He pulled a gold fountain pen from his pocket and tossed it onto the envelope. "Sign the papers, Ryder. Be out by tomorrow morning. If you make this difficult, my lawyers will ensure you get nothing. No stipend, no apartment, nothing." The front door chimed. Julian's face smoothed over instantly. "That will be Sasha. She's moving in tonight." Ryder felt the air leave her lungs. "Tonight? I haven't even packed." "Then you better start." The elevator doors slid open, and Sasha Cross walked in. She was undeniably stunning, 6 feet of legs and attitude, draped in a red Versace trench coat, shaking wet umbrella droplets onto the pristine marble floor. She looked at Julian with a predatory smile, then glanced at Ryder like one might look at a stain on a rug. "Oh, honey," Sasha purred, walking over to link her arm through Julian's. "Is she still here? I thought you said the housekeeping was done." Julian smirked, leaning down to kiss Sasha's cheek. "Just finishing up the paperwork, babe." Ryder looked at the two of them. The man she had loved for 3 years, the father of the child growing inside her, and the woman who had stolen his vanity. She picked up the pen. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply uncapped the pen and signed her name, Ryder Vance. "You're right, Julian," Ryder said, her voice devoid of emotion. "We don't make sense anymore." She placed the pen down and walked to the bedroom to pack a single suitcase. She took nothing he had bought her. No jewelry, no designer clothes, just her old sweaters, her books, and a small framed photo of her late mother. As she walked to the door, dragging her suitcase, Julian called out from the living room, where he was pouring champagne for Sasha. "Don't forget to leave the keys." Ryder placed the keys on the console table. She paused, looking at the grand penthouse one last time. "Goodbye, Julian," she said. "I hope the price you got for your soul was worth it." She walked out into the rain. Once she was in the taxi, soaking wet and shivering, Ryder pulled out her phone. It was an old model, screen cracked. She dialed a number she hadn't called in 5 years. It rang once, twice. "This is the private line of Silas Vance," a gruff, deep voice answered. "Who is this?" Ryder took a deep breath, her hand resting on her stomach. "Daddy," she whispered, a tear finally escaping. "It's Ryder. I'm coming home." On the other end of the line, the voice of the most feared tech tycoon in the world softened instantly. Ryder? My star? Where are you? I'm sending the jet. 6 months later. The world of Julian Thorne was glittering. Since the divorce, Thorne Enterprises' stock had risen 15%. The media loved him and Sasha. They were the it couple of New York. Every magazine cover featured them. Julian in his sharp suits, Sasha in couture, laughing at galas, vacationing in Saint-Tropez. They painted the narrative perfectly. Julian was the ambitious genius who had been held back by a depressed, unsupportive wife. Ryder was painted as a gold digger who had tried to trap him and failed. Sasha gave interviews, hinting that Ryder was emotionally unstable. It was hard for Julian, Sasha had told Vanity Fair, wiping away a fake tear. He tried to save her, but some people just don't want to be in the light. She just wanted his money, really. Julian drank it all in. He felt invincible. However, beneath the surface, cracks were forming. The Q3 projections are down, Julian, Marcus, his CFO, said, sweating as he looked at the tablets in the boardroom. What do you mean, down? Julian snapped, slamming his hand on the mahogany table. We have the visibility. We have the brand. We have the fame, Marcus corrected. But the tech is lagging. Our new AI integration is buggy. We're losing contracts to Helios Systems. Silas Vance is crushing us in the European market. If we don't get the Helios partnership for the microchip supply, we're going to be insolvent by Christmas. Helios Systems. The name haunted Julian. It was the Leviathan of the tech world. Silas Vance, the CEO, was a ghost. He never gave interviews, never appeared at parties. He was known as the Iron Recluse. Get me a meeting with Vance, Julian ordered. We've tried, Marcus said. His secretary rejects us every time. They say Mr. Vance doesn't do business with tabloid fodder. Julian's face flushed red. Fix it. Get me an invite to the Winter Solstice Gala in Aspen. I know Vance attends that. It's the only event he goes to. That's impossible to get tickets for, Marcus said. It's invite only for the top 0.01%. Sasha can get us in, Julian said dismissively. She knows everyone. Later that night, at their new penthouse in Tribeca, bigger, more expensive than the last, Julian found Sasha throwing a vase across the room. They cancelled my contract, she screamed. Who? Julian asked, dodging a shard of porcelain. Chanel, Dior, both of them. Sasha paced, her mascara running. They said my image doesn't align with their new direction. Something about integrity. This is your ex-wife's fault. Ryder? Julian laughed incredulously. Ryder is a nobody, Sasha. She disappeared to Queens. She's probably waiting tables. Then why? Sasha hissed, holding up her phone. Is Justice for Ryder trending on Twitter? Julian grabbed the phone. Someone had dug up old photos of Ryder volunteering at soup kitchens, looking tired but kind, contrasted with Sasha's recent interview calling her a leech. The internet was turning. But that wasn't what caught Julian's eye. It was a paparazzi photo taken in San Francisco 3 days ago. It was grainy, but it showed a woman getting into a black limousine. She was heavily pregnant, wearing a coat that cost more than Julian's annual salary, a limited edition cashmere trench from the row. The woman was Ryder. And the man holding the umbrella for her? That was Silas Vance's head of security, a man known as the Bull. That's impossible, Julian muttered. She's broke. She's obviously found a sugar daddy, Sasha spat. Probably some old rich guy who feels sorry for her. Julian felt a strange knot in his stomach. He zoomed in on the photo. Ryder looked different. Her hair was polished, her skin glowing. She didn't look like the broken woman he had thrown out. She looked regal. Forget her, Julian said, though he couldn't stop looking at the photo. We have bigger problems. I need to get into the Aspen Gala to meet Silas Vance. Can you make the calls?" Sasha preened, recovering her composure. "Of course I can. I'm Sasha Cross. I'll get us the best table." Meanwhile, in San Francisco, the Vance estate sat on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean, a fortress of glass and steel hidden by redwoods. Ryder sat in the sunroom, her hand resting on her swollen belly. She was 8 months pregnant now. She looked out at the ocean, a cup of tea in her hand. "Are you sure you want to do this, Ryder?" Silas Vance stood in the doorway. He was a giant of a man, even in his 60s, with silver hair and eyes that could cut glass. But when he looked at his daughter, he was just a father. "He humiliated me, Dad," Ryder said softly, not turning around. "He threw me away like garbage. He insulted you. He insulted our family, and he abandoned his child." "I could crush his company with a phone call," Silas said, his voice a low rumble. "I could buy his debt and foreclose on him tomorrow." "No," Ryder said, turning to face him. Her eyes were hard. "That's too easy. He cares about image. He cares about value. I want to show him exactly what he lost. I want him to look me in the eye when he realizes it." "The Aspen Gala," Silas nodded. "He's desperate for a meeting with me. My team tells me he's been begging for weeks." "Grant him the meeting," Ryder said, "but not with you." Silas raised an eyebrow. "With whom?" "With the new Vice President of Global Operations for Helios Systems," Ryder said, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "Me." "You're ready?" Silas asked. "The press will be there. The world will know you are a Vance. Your quiet life will be over." Ryder looked down at her stomach. "My quiet life died the night he kicked me out into the rain. I'm not Ryder the librarian anymore, Dad. I'm Ryder Vance, and I'm going to take back what's mine." Silas grinned, a shark-like expression that terrified his competitors. "That's my girl. I'll have the jet ready." 1 month before the gala. The boardroom of Thorn Enterprises smelled of stale coffee and fear. Julian Thorn sat at the head of the table, his tie loosened, a rare sign of disarray for a man who prided himself on perfection. "The stock is down another 4 points, Julian," Marcus said, his voice trembling as he pointed to the screen. "The rumors about the AI failure in the beta test leaked. TechCrunch runs an article tomorrow. If we don't have a savior by the end of the quarter, the board is going to call for a vote of no confidence." Julian rubbed his temples. The migraine had been there for 3 days. "The savior is Helios Systems. The savior is Silas Vance. Did we get the invite to Aspen?" "We did," Marcus said, sliding a heavy cream-colored envelope across the table. "But it cost us. We had to donate $500,000 to the Vance Foundation just to get on the wait list for a table." $500,000, Julian hissed. "We don't have that kind of liquidity right now." "We didn't have a choice," Marcus shot back. "It's the only way you get into the room with him. And there's a catch. The invite specifies that all attendees must be vetted for security. They've been digging into your financials, Julian. If they see how leveraged we are—" "They won't," Julian said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "I'll charm them. I always do. Once I get face-to-face with Vance, I'll sell him the vision. He's an old dinosaur. He needs young blood like me to make Helios cool again." Julian walked out of the office, needing fresh air. He checked his phone. 5 missed calls from Sasha. No texts, just calls. That meant she wanted something. He called her back while waiting for the elevator. "Where have you been?" Sasha's voice shrieked through the receiver. "I've been at the atelier for 2 hours. The designer is refusing to release the gown for Aspen unless we pay the full $50,000 upfront. He says my credit card was declined." Julian closed his eyes. "Sasha, use the black card." "I did. It didn't work. I'll call the bank," Julian lied. He knew exactly why it didn't work. He had lowered the limit to preserve cash flow. Just tell him to bill the company. Put it under marketing expenses. Fine, Sasha huffed. But hurry up. And Julian, people are talking. They're saying you're losing your touch. I need you to buy me those sapphire earrings we saw at Tiffany's. I need to look expensive in Aspen. If I look cheap, you look cheap. Julian hung up the phone without saying goodbye. He leaned his head against the cool metal of the elevator wall. For a split second, a memory washed over him. Ryder, sitting on their old couch, knitting a scarf. She never asked for earrings. She never screamed about credit cards. When business was tight in the early days, she had quietly transferred her own savings into their joint account and told him she found some extra money. He shook the thought away. She was weak, he told himself. Sasha pushes me to be better. Meanwhile, at the Helios headquarters in Palo Alto, the atmosphere was starkly different. The Helios boardroom was a sanctuary of calm, high-tech efficiency. The walls were smart glass, displaying real-time global logistics. Ryder sat at the head of the table. She was 8.5 months pregnant, but she didn't look tired. She looked formidable. She wore a custom-tailored navy power suit that accommodated her bump, her hair pulled back in a sleek, severe bun. The acquisition of the microchip plant in Taiwan is complete, Ryder said, her voice clear and authoritative. She pointed to a hologram floating above the table. This gives us control over 60% of the global supply chain. If Thorn Enterprises wants chips for their new AI, they have to come through us. The board members, seasoned veterans of the industry who had initially been skeptical of the boss's daughter, nodded in respect. She wasn't just Silas's daughter. She was a shark. She had spent the last 6 months reading every contract, every patent, every financial report. She knew Thorn Enterprises' books better than Julian did. "Excellent work, Ryder," Silas said from the other end of the table. He looked proud, but his eyes held a question. "We received the RSVP from Julian Thorn for the Aspen Gala." The room went silent. Everyone knew the history. The NDA Ryder had signed regarding her identity was ironclad, but the board knew she was divorced. They didn't know who the ex-husband was, until now. "He's desperate," Ryder said coolly. "His liquidity ratio is below 1.5. He's bleeding cash on image maintenance and bad R&D. He's coming to Aspen to beg." "Do we crush him?" one of the directors asked. Ryder smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "No, not yet. If we crush him now, he declares bankruptcy and walks away. I want him to negotiate. I want him to sign a deal that saves his company but strips him of control. I want him to hand me the keys to his kingdom, thinking he's won, only to realize he's working for me." She stood up, gathering her files. "I will handle the meeting in Aspen personally." "In your condition?" Silas asked gently. Ryder placed a hand on her stomach. The baby kicked, a strong, reassuring thump. "We're strong," she said. "Besides, the doctor cleared me for travel. It's time Julian met the real me. Not the librarian who made him tea, but the woman who owns his future." The Winter Solstice Gala, Aspen. The Little Nell Hotel had been transformed into a winter palace. Icicles made of crystal hung from the ceiling, reflecting the light of 1,000 candles. The air smelled of pine, expensive perfume, and old money. Outside, the snow fell softly. Inside, the temperature was rising. Julian Thorn adjusted his tuxedo. It was a Brioni, impeccable as always, but he felt like he was suffocating. Beside him, Sasha Cross was a vision in a sheer silver gown that left little to the imagination. It was stunning, yes, but in a room full of dowager countesses and tech billionaires wearing understated velvet and vintage pearls, she looked loud. "Stop checking your phone," Sasha whispered aggressively, smiling for a photographer. "You look nervous." "I am nervous," Julian hissed. "Vance is here. I saw his security detail. If I don't get 5 minutes with him tonight, we're done." They moved through the crowd. Julian scanned the room. Desperate. He saw the CEO of Google chatting with the Prime Minister of Canada. He saw the founder of Amazon laughing with a Saudi prince. This was the league he wanted to be in. "Mr. Thorne," a man in a black suit with an earpiece stepped in front of him. "Mr. Vance's party is seated in the private mezzanine. You have been granted an audience during the cocktail hour." Julian let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Thank God. "Lead the way." "Just you, sir," the guard said, blocking Sasha. "Excuse me?" Sasha bristled. "I'm his partner. I'm Sasha Cross." "Strictly business, ma'am," the guard said, his face a stone wall. Julian turned to Sasha. "Babe, go get a drink. Work the room. I'll be back in 20 minutes with the deal of the century." He didn't wait for her answer. He followed the guard up the sweeping staircase to the VIP mezzanine, a secluded balcony overlooking the ballroom. His heart pounded. This was it. The moment he would charm Silas Vance. The guard opened a set of double doors. Julian walked into a private lounge. A fire crackled in the hearth. Standing by the window, looking out at the snowy mountain peaks, was a figure. But it wasn't Silas Vance. It was a woman. She was facing away from him. She wore a gown of deep, midnight blue velvet that cascaded to the floor like liquid night. It was elegant, regal, and undeniably expensive. Her hair was swept up in an intricate style, held in place by a diamond pin that caught the firelight. "Mr. Vance?" Julian asked, confused. "I was told—" The woman turned slowly. Julian's breath hitched. His brain couldn't process the visual data. It was Ryder. But it wasn't the Ryder he knew. The Ryder he knew wore oversized sweaters and no makeup. This woman radiated power. Her skin was luminous, her makeup flawless, highlighting the sharp cheekbones he had never noticed before. The diamonds around her neck were real, heavy, vintage sapphires that matched the engagement ring on her finger. No, not an engagement ring. A family crest ring. And she was heavily, unmistakably pregnant. "Hello, Julian," she said. Her voice was the same, yet different. It held a timbre of steel that hadn't been there in the kitchen in New York. "Ryder?" Julian whispered, stumbling forward. What are you doing here? How did you get in? Are you working catering?" It was a stupid question, and he knew it the moment it left his lips. No caterer wore a necklace worth a small island. Ryder laughed, a low, dry sound. "Catering? You always did lack imagination, Julian." She walked toward a high-backed leather chair and sat down gracefully, resting her hands on her stomach. "I'm here representing Helios Systems," she said calmly. Julian blinked. "You? You got a job at Helios? As what? An assistant?" "I'm the Vice President of Global Operations," Ryder corrected him. "And the majority shareholder." Julian felt the room spin. "That's impossible. You're a librarian. You have nothing." "I chose to be a librarian because I loved books," Ryder said, her eyes boring into his. "And I chose to live simply because I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for my checkbook. I wanted to see if a man could love Ryder, the woman, not Ryder Vance, the heiress." The name hit him like a physical blow. "Vance! Vance!" Julian stuttered. "Silas Vance. He's—" "My father," Ryder finished. Silence. Absolute, crushing silence. Julian's mind raced back through their 3 years of marriage. The way she never talked about her family. The way she had ironclad knowledge of complex subjects, but downplayed it. The way she never panicked about money, even when they were broke. He had divorced the daughter of the richest man in tech. "No," Julian gasped, his knees feeling weak. "No, this is a joke. You're messing with me." Ryder reached for a crystal pitcher and poured herself a glass of water. "Sit down, Julian. You look like you're going to faint, and we have business to discuss." Julian collapsed into the chair opposite her. He stared at her belly. "The baby. My child." "My child," Ryder corrected. "You made your position very clear that night in the penthouse. You wanted nothing to do with a mistake. You wanted a clean break." "I didn't know," Julian pleaded, his voice rising in panic. "Ryder, if I had known who you were—" "That," Ryder cut him off, her voice slicing through the air like a razor, "is exactly the problem. If you had known I was a Vance, you would have treated me like a queen, but because you thought I was a nobody, you treated me like trash. That tells me everything about your character, Julian." She opened a leather folder on the table. "Now, let's talk about Thorn Enterprises. My analysts tell me you're about 3 weeks away from insolvency." Julian stared at her. He felt small. He felt like a child sitting in front of a principal. The power dynamic had shifted so violently he had whiplash. "Ryder, please," he whispered. "We were married. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It meant everything to me," Ryder said, her voice softening for just a fraction of a second before hardening again. "But you filed the papers. You signed them. It's over. Now, I am offering you a lifeline. Helios Systems is willing to acquire Thorn Enterprises." "Acquire?" Julian choked. "I want a partnership, a merger." "No," Ryder said firmly. "Acquisition. We buy you out. You stay on as a figurehead CEO for 2 years to maintain investor confidence. But you report to me. The board reports to me. And we own your IP." "I built that company." Julian stood up, his anger flaring. "I won't work for my ex-wife." "Then you can explain to your shareholders why the stock went to 0 on Monday morning," Ryder said, closing the folder. "And you can explain to Sasha why she can't buy any more sapphire earrings." She stood up, struggling slightly with the weight of the baby. Julian instinctively reached out to help her, but she held up a hand. "Don't," she said. The door opened, and Silas Vance walked in. He looked at Julian with pure, unadulterated loathing. "Is this the man?" Silas rumbled. "Yes, Dad," Ryder said. "This is Julian." Silas walked up to Julian. He was 3 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier. He leaned in close. "You broke my daughter's heart," Silas whispered, his voice like gravel. "If she hadn't asked me to spare you for the sake of the baby's legacy, I would have buried you today. You have until midnight to sign the deal." Silas offered his arm to Ryder. "Come, my dear. The keynote is starting." Ryder took her father's arm. She stopped at the door and looked back at Julian, who stood trembling in the middle of the room. "Enjoy the party, Julian," she said. "I hear the champagne is excellent." They walked out, leaving Julian alone in the silent room. He walked to the balcony railing and looked down at the ballroom. He saw Sasha waving frantically at him from the bar, looking drunk and messy. Then he looked at the stage. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the center. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer boomed, "please welcome the future of Helios Systems, Ms. Ryder Vance." Thunderous applause filled the room. Julian watched as his ex-wife walked onto the stage, glowing in the spotlight, holding the future in her hands. And for the first time in his life, Julian Thorn realized he was the poorest man in the room. The day after the gala, the hangover wasn't from alcohol, it was from the loss of an empire. Julian sat in the conference room of what used to be his headquarters. The table was littered with lawyers, his team looking defeated, Ryder's team looking like wolves circling a wounded deer. "Sign here, Mr. Thorn." Ryder's lead counsel, a sharp-faced woman named Beatrice, said, pointing a manicured finger at the bottom of the page. Julian looked at the document. Acquisition agreement between Helios Systems and Thorn Enterprises. "Do I have any other options?" Julian asked, his voice rasping. "Bankruptcy," Beatrice stated flatly. "Foreclosure on your properties. A protracted SEC investigation into your inflated Q3 projections." Julian clenched his jaw. He picked up the pen. It was a cheap plastic one provided by the lawyers, not his gold fountain pen. He signed. With that scrawl, he ceased to be the king of his own castle. He was now an employee. "Excellent," Beatrice said, snapping the binder shut. "Ms. Vance will be arriving shortly to inspect the premises. She has requested that you vacate the CEO suite immediately. Your new office is on the 12th floor. "The 12th floor?" Julian stood up, outraged. "That's middle management. I'm the founder." "You are the figurehead CEO," Beatrice corrected. "The 12th floor has been cleared for you. The penthouse office is now the satellite HQ for Helios." Julian stormed out of the room, needing to vent. He called Sasha. "Babe, tell me you're home," Julian said. "I need you. It's been a nightmare." "I'm at the Pierre." Sasha's voice was icy. "The hotel." "Why?" "Because I saw the news, Julian. The Wall Street Journal says you sold the company. They're calling you the Employee of the Month on Twitter," Sasha screamed. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is for me? I'm supposed to be dating a mogul, not a middle manager." "It's temporary," Julian lied, pacing the hallway. "I'm still the CEO. I still have the salary." "But you don't have the power," Sasha spat. "And you definitely don't have the Vance fortune." "My God, Julian, you were married to a billionaire heiress, and you dumped her for me? Even I think you're an idiot." "Sasha, don't start," Julian warned. "I did this for us." "You did this because you're shallow," Sasha retorted. "I'm staying at the Pierre until you fix this. Don't come by unless you have a diamond the size of a grape. I have a casting call for a reality show. At least one of us needs to be famous." She hung up. Julian stared at the phone. He was alone. The elevator chimed. The doors opened and Ryder walked out. She was flanked by security and a team of architects. She wore a cream-colored maternity dress under a blazer, looking fresh and professional. "Mr. Thorn," she nodded, not stopping. "Marcus, show the architects the layout. I want the wall between the CEO suite and the boardroom knocked down. We need an open concept." "That's my office," Julian shouted, chasing after her. "You're tearing down my mahogany paneling?" Ryder stopped and turned. The hallway fell silent. Employees peeked out of their cubicles, the same employees Julian had ignored for years. "It's my office, Julian," Ryder said calmly. "And the mahogany makes the room too dark. I prefer natural light, transparency, something this company has lacked for a long time." She looked him up and down. "Why are you still on this floor?" "Security. Please escort Mr. Thorn to his new desk on the 12th floor. And take his access badge. He needs a Level 3 clearance badge now. Level 5 is restricted to executive leadership." Two burly guards stepped forward. "Right this way, sir." Julian looked around. He saw his former assistant, Jessica, hiding a smile behind her hand. He saw Marcus, his traitorous CFO, holding Ryder's blueprints. He was being evicted from his own life, and everyone was watching. 3 weeks later, life on the 12th floor was a purgatory. Julian's office was a glass box in the middle of the sales floor. He had no secretary. He had to fetch his own coffee. Every time he walked to the break room, the whispers stopped. "That's him. The guy who fumbled the bag. I heard he asked Miss Vance for a raise and she laughed." Julian sat at his desk, staring at a spreadsheet he didn't understand. His job was essentially meaningless. He signed papers Ryder sent down attended Zoom calls where he wasn't allowed to speak, and acted as the face for press releases apologizing for past errors. His phone buzzed. A text from Sasha. "Rent at Pierre due. Transfer 10K. ASAP." He transferred it. His personal savings were draining fast. Sasha was spending like the world was ending, terrified that her lifestyle was about to evaporate. Suddenly, the intercom on his desk buzzed. It was a general announcement, but the voice wasn't the receptionist. It was Silas Vance. "Attention all staff. This is Silas Vance. We have a medical emergency in the executive suite. Paramedics have been called. Please clear the elevators immediately." Julian's heart stopped. Ryder. He didn't think. He ran. He ignored the level 3 badge restriction, jumping the turnstile at the elevator bank. He jammed the button. When it didn't come fast enough, he hit the stairs. He ran up 30 flights of stairs, his lungs burning, his legs screaming. When he burst onto the top floor, chaos reigned. Paramedics were wheeling a stretcher out of what used to be his office. Ryder was on the stretcher. She was convulsing. "What's happening?" Julian screamed, pushing past a security guard. "Ryder!" Silas was running beside the stretcher, looking terrified. "It's eclampsia. Her blood pressure spiked. She's seizing." "I'm coming with her!" Julian yelled. "No, you're not!" Silas roared, shoving Julian back with surprising strength. "You've done enough damage." "That is my child," Julian shouted, grabbing the side of the stretcher as they entered the elevator. "She's my wife, ex-wife. You can't keep me from them." Ryder's eyes fluttered open for a second. She looked dazed, in pain. She saw Julian, sweating and panting, his tie askew. "Let him come," she whispered weakly, before her eyes rolled back. Silas hesitated, then glared at Julian. "Get in. If you say one word, I'll throw you down the shaft." The waiting room was silent, save for the ticking of a clock and the pacing of Silas Vance. Julian sat in a plastic chair, his head in his hands. It had been 4 hours. Doctors had been rushing in and out. The words "emergency C-section" and "fetal distress" had been thrown around like grenades. Julian prayed. He hadn't prayed in years, not since his mother died. But he prayed now. Let her be okay. Let the baby be okay. Take the company. Take the money. Just let them live. He realized, sitting in that sterile room, that he didn't care about the stock price. He didn't care about Sasha's earrings. The only thing that mattered was the woman he had called boring and the life they had created. The doors swung open. A surgeon in blue scrubs walked out, pulling down his mask. He looked exhausted. Silas stopped pacing. Julian stood up. "Mr. Vance," the surgeon said. "Is she—" Silas couldn't finish the sentence. "She's stable," the surgeon said. A collective breath was released. It was touch and go. The seizures were severe. We had to deliver immediately to save her life. "And the baby?" Julian asked, his voice cracking. The surgeon looked at Julian, then back to Silas. "You have a grandson, a healthy baby boy, 6 pounds, 4 ounces. He's in the NICU for observation because he's a few weeks early, but he's strong." Julian felt tears stream down his face. A son. He had a son. "Can we see them?" Julian asked. "Ryder is still recovering from anesthesia," the surgeon said, "but you can see the baby through the glass in the NICU." Silas nodded and began to walk away. Julian followed. "Where do you think you're going?" Silas stopped and turned, blocking the hallway. "To see my son," Julian said. "You gave up that right," Silas said, his voice low and dangerous. "You abandoned them. You don't get to celebrate the victory when you weren't there for the battle." "I am his father," Julian yelled. "My name will be on the birth certificate." "Biologically, yes," Silas said, "but a father protects his family. You discarded yours." Go home, Julian. Go back to your model. Go back to your empty penthouse. No, Julian said firmly. I'm not leaving. Silas stared at him for a long moment. He saw the desperation in Julian's eyes. Fine, Silas spat. Look, but do not touch, and do not think this changes anything. They walked to the NICU window. There, in a plastic incubator, hooked up to monitors, was a tiny, wriggling infant. He had dark hair, Julian's hair. He was kicking his legs, fighting the blankets. Julian pressed his hand against the glass. A sob racked his body. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He had spent his life building skyscrapers, but this was a masterpiece. He looks like you, Silas said, grudgingly, standing beside him. Unfortunately. What's his name? Julian whispered. She hasn't named him yet, Silas said. She was waiting. 2 days later, Ryder was moved to a private recovery suite. The room was filled with flowers, lilies from the mayor, orchids from Apple, roses from the governor. Julian had slept in the waiting room for 2 nights. He hadn't shaved. He wore the same wrinkled suit. He knocked softly on the door. Come in. Ryder's voice was weak but clear. Julian entered. Ryder was sitting up in bed, looking pale but radiant. In her arms, she held the bundle of blue blankets. You look terrible, Julian, she said softly. I deserve to, Julian said, standing at the foot of the bed. He looked at the baby. He's beautiful, Ryder. You did good. Ryder looked down at the baby. He has your chin and your stubbornness. Ryder, Julian started, his voice trembling. I know I can't fix this. I know I broke something that can't be glued back together. But seeing him, seeing you, I want to try. I'll fire Sasha. I'll quit the company if you want. I just want to be a dad. Please. Ryder looked at him with sad eyes. She didn't look angry anymore. She just looked tired. Julian, she said, you fell in love with a fantasy. You loved the idea of success. And now that you see I have it, you want me back. If I were still just Ryder the librarian, would you be standing here? Or would you be with Sasha? Julian opened his mouth, but the truth stuck in his throat. He didn't know. And that was the damnation. I don't need you to support us, Ryder continued. I have more money than God. I don't need you to protect us. I have my father. And I don't need you to love us because you clearly don't know how to love anyone but yourself. That's not true, Julian stepped forward. Isn't it? Ryder asked. You're asking for a second chance, not because you realized you loved me, but because you realized you made a bad trade. You're a businessman, Julian. You regret the loss of an asset. She shifted the baby, kissing his forehead. His name is Leo, Ryder said. Leo Silas Vance. Julian froze. Vance? Not Thorne. Why would he carry the name of a man who didn't want him? Ryder asked. He is a Vance. He is the heir to Helios, and he will be raised to respect women, not to discard them when they become inconvenient. You can't do that, Julian whispered. I can, Ryder said. My lawyers are drafting the custody agreement. You will get visitation, supervised at first. You will pay child support. Not because I need it, but because it's the principle. But you will not be his family. You will be his biological father. That is all. The door opened. It wasn't a nurse. It was Sasha. She stormed in, wearing sunglasses and a fur coat, holding a tabloid magazine. There you are, Sasha shrieked, ignoring the hospital setting. You've been ghosting me for 2 days, and look at this. She threw the magazine on the bed. The cover showed Julian sleeping in the hospital waiting room chair, mouth open, looking like a hobo. The headline, The Fallen King, Julian Thorne, sleeps on floor while ex-wife births billionaire heir. You're making me look like a joke, Sasha yelled. My friends are laughing at me. They say I'm dating a homeless man." The baby started to cry at the noise. Ryder's eyes went cold. "Get her out." "Ryder, wait." Julian tried to intervene. "Get her out," Ryder hissed, clutching Leo, "or I call security." Julian turned to Sasha. He looked at the woman he had destroyed his life for. She was selfish, loud, and empty. "Sasha," Julian said, his voice deadly calm. "Shut up." "Excuse me," Sasha gasped. "We're done," Julian said. "Get out! Go find another idiot." Sasha's jaw dropped. She looked from Julian to Ryder, then let out a screech of rage. "Fine! You're broke anyway. I've been talking to the producer of Love Island. I don't need you." She stormed out, slamming the door. Silence returned to the room. The baby settled down. "I sent her away," Julian said, looking at Ryder, hoping for a spark of approval. "I chose you." Ryder looked at him with pity. "You didn't choose me, Julian," she said softly. "You just ran out of other options." She pressed a button on the bed rail. "Nurse, I'm ready to rest now. Please show Mr. Thorne out." A nurse appeared instantly. "Sir, you need to leave." Julian looked at his son one last time. "Goodbye, Leo." He walked out of the room, the door clicking shut behind him. He was free of Sasha. He had seen his son. But as he walked down the hospital corridor, he realized the terrifying truth. He had cleared the wreckage, but the house was already burned to the ground. And the worst was yet to come. Because Sasha Cross was not the type of woman to go quietly. She knew where the bodies were buried, literally and metaphorically. Revenge wasn't a dish served cold. For Sasha Cross, it was served live on Good Morning America. To save herself from the sinking ship of Julian's failing reputation, she handed the authorities everything. The falsified Q3 reports, the inflated AI projections, and the secret emails Julian thought were deleted. "He made me do it," Sasha sobbed to the cameras, playing the victim perfectly. By noon, the FBI swarmed the 12th floor. Julian was dragged out in handcuffs past his former employees, the news tickers in the lobby screaming, "Thorne Empire collapses." Days later, in a bleak, grey visitation room, Julian sat across from Ryder. He looked shattered, stripped of his bespoke suits and his arrogance. "Please," he begged, his hands trembling on the steel table. "One word from you, and they cut a deal. Probation, house arrest. Do it for Leo. Don't let his father rot in a cell for 15 years. Ryder looked at him, not with anger, but with a crushing pity that hurt worse than hatred. "I thought about that," she said softly. "But a father protects his family. You discarded yours for a magazine cover. If I buy your freedom, I teach our son that money outweighs justice. That is not the Vance legacy." She stood up, the heavy steel door buzzing to unlock. "I won't save you from the consequences of your own greed, Julian. You wanted a life without me? Now you have it." 5 years later, golden sunlight bathed a San Francisco park. A maintenance worker in a grey uniform paused his sweeping to retrieve a red kite that had crashed near his trash cart. A 5-year-old boy with messy dark hair ran up, breathless and laughing. "Thanks, mister." The worker looked down. He saw his own hazel eyes staring back at him. It was Leo. Standing nearby was Ryder, radiant and laughing, watching over her son. The worker was Julian. He wanted to speak, to claim his blood, but the distance between them was now an ocean he could never cross. "You're welcome," Julian rasped, handing the kite back. "Come on, Leo," Ryder called out, unaware of the ghost standing 10 feet away. Julian watched them walk away, a fortress of love he had locked himself out of. As the sun set, the former CEO turned back to his broom, sweeping the path for the family he threw away. And so, the curtain falls on Julian Thorne. In his chase for a brighter diamond, he failed to realize he was already holding the rarest gem of all. He learned the hardest lesson life can teach us. True value isn't found in stock prices, public image, or the validation of strangers. It is found in loyalty, in family, and in the quiet, boring moments of love that we often take for granted. Julian built a castle of glass, forgetting that glass doesn't just shine, it shatters. Ryder didn't just survive his betrayal. She built an empire on the high ground he left behind. Remember, be careful what you throw away in search of something better. You might just be throwing away your only chance at a happy ending. And if you want more stories of karma, revenge, and shocking twists, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a drama. Share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Until next time, keep your standards high and your circle loyal. Bye.